What if the biggest lie in the writing world today isn't about talent or discipline, but about time? There's a version of what a writer's life should look like that gets sold to us constantly. It usually involves quiet mornings, a beautiful desk, long, uninterrupted writing hours, and the luxury of thinking about nothing but your book. And if your life looks nothing like that, if you're fitting writing in between meetings or squeezing words out during a lunch break or collapsing into bed wondering how anyone with a full-time job ever actually finishes writing a book, you're not alone. Because for most people, that picture doesn't just feel out of reach, it starts to feel like proof that you're not the right kind of writer or that you don't have the time to ever finish writing a book. Today, I want to dismantle that completely because the writers I work with who are holding down full-time jobs while writing the books, they're not writing less, they're writing smarter. And in this episode, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that too. If you feel called to write a book, but writer's block, procrastination, and self-doubt keep pulling you from the page, you're not alone, and you're not meant to stay stuck. Hi, I'm Madison Michaels, author and life coach, and I've created this podcast as a creative space grounded in faith and mindset transformations to help you break through your blocks, gain creative clarity, and finally finish the book you're meant to write. So grab your cup of liquid gold and let's write the darn book together. Hello, my friends, and welcome to Write the Darn Book. I'm your host, Madison Michaels, and today we're diving into one of the questions I hear most often from the writers I work with, and that is, how do you actually fit writing into a life that's already full? We're talking specifically about writing while you're working full-time, and I've got a real strategy for you today, not just encouragement. So settle in because this one's going to shift something for you. Let's start with the myth. And I call it a myth because it is one, even though it's treated as gospels in some writing circles. And the myth is this: real writers have time to write. They've arranged their lives around the work. They have the morning hours. They have the quiet. They have the mental bandwidth to write. And if you don't have those things, if your life is structured around a job, a career, a mortgage, maybe family, then you're somehow writing from a position of deficit. You're already behind before you've opened the document. And I want to be really direct about this because I think it does enormous damage. The myth of the writing life doesn't just make working writers feel less serious, it makes them feel less legitimate. It creates this low-grade shame that sits underneath every writing session, like you should be apologizing for the constraints you're working within rather than working intelligently with them. And here's what I know after years of writing myself while working full-time, as well as coaching other writers that are also working, is that writers who finish their books aren't the ones with the most time. They're the ones who've made the best decisions about the time they do have. And that distinction matters so much because time isn't what's standing between you and your finished book. Strategy is. This other thing that the myth of you have to have so much time to write does, which is also where I see writers really suffer, is it silences them. They don't talk about their book at work because it feels frivolous. They don't talk about their job when they're with their writing communities or groups because it feels like an admission of not being fully committed to writing. So they exist in this gap where neither world really quite claims them, and they write in stolen moments, half apologizing for the whole endeavor. Now, if that resonates with you, I want you to know that the gap is where some of the most extraordinary books get written, not in spite of the constraints, but because of what constraints force you to do, to be intentional, to be efficient with your words, and to know exactly what scene you're writing before you sit down to write, because you might only have 20 minutes and you're not wasting a moment of that time staring at the screen, wondering where you left off or where you should go in your writing. So, working writers develop skills that writers with unlimited time often don't. They learn how to drop into the work and the page really fast, how to pick up the thread quickly, and to produce on demand. Those aren't small skills, those are the skills of a professional. I want you to know too that I've genuinely been in your shoes with this one, and I'm not speaking from the outside looking in. I was working in the police for 18 years, doing 10, 12-hour shifts. And that job doesn't stay at work. It comes home with you. It lives in your head. It's really stressful and demanding in a way that's hard to explain. But by the time I would often walk into the door to my family after work, I still had all of that work with me inside my mind. And on top of the job and my family commitments and responsibilities, I was also under contract to write books. So I didn't have the luxury of that beautiful picture of free time that the writing world tries to sell you. Having those quiet mornings to write, or those long uninterrupted hours, or that space to just sit and let the words come, that wasn't my life. I had to fit writing in when I could, whatever windows were left after everything else. And I'm telling you this because I want you to trust that what I'm sharing today isn't theoretical. It's what I actually lived, and it's what I've since refined through coaching writers who are also navigating exactly the same thing. One writer that I worked with was a registered nurse on rotating shifts. So night shifts, day shifts, sometimes, back to back work, often a lot of overtime too, with no consistent schedule and a brain that was thoroughly exhausted by the time she sat down to write. And she'd been carrying her story around for 3 years. She'd make notes, scenes, jot points down about her characters, all the raw material for her book, but she couldn't make it kind of cohere because she kept waiting for a block of time that was large enough to sink properly into actually writing the book. What worked for her that we worked on together wasn't actually crafting her story. It was crafting a system for writing that worked in with the time she had. So we mapped out the windows that she did have to write, not the ones she wished she had or hoped she had. And we built a habit for her writing that fit inside those windows instead of waiting for those windows to expand. She finished her first draft in 7 months, not because her life changed, but because her approach to the life she had changed in response with her writing. Another coaching client of mine that I worked with was a project manager in a demanding corporate role who'd convinced himself that he wasn't a real writer because he couldn't produce the word counts that he saw or read that other writers were doing online. And he'd seen someone posting that they were writing 3,000 words in a session, and he felt deflated before he'd even started because at best, sometimes he could only manage a couple of hundred words. Now, when we reframed what a productive writing session actually meant for him in his, unique circumstances with his unique wiring, he started to finish things. Short stories at first, and then chapters, and then a full manuscript that he's now editing. And that shift is available to you too. So let's get into the actual strategy because I don't want today to be just encouragement. I want to give you some tools that you can actually use this week. Now, the main tool I'm going to give you is what I call the time stacking method, and it has 3 components: identification, preparation, and protection. The first step is to identify your actual writing windows, not just your ideal windows or what you would like to have, but what you actually do have. So forget what a writing routine is supposed to look like And instead, I want you to map your real week and the real windows that you do have that you could write in. So open up your calendar or a piece of paper, and I want you to look at the next 7 days as they actually exist. I want you to look at every gap that you have that's 15 minutes or longer. Could be before work, during a commute, during a lunch break, between meetings, perhaps even after the kids are in bed, or you could even look at getting up earlier in the morning before anyone else is up. You might be surprised at how many windows appear when you're looking for them honestly rather than dismissing them as too small. 15 minutes is not too small. Research on creative output consistently shows that it is consistency itself, so showing up repeatedly to the page, even briefly, not the duration of writing, that builds momentum. Your brain starts to associate those windows with writing. And the drop in time when you actually sit down to write and you actually start creating words on the page gets shorter and shorter the more you use them. Now, for writers who have a dove or owl personality tendency, you might find this kind of fragmented writing very uncomfortable at first. Doves often need emotional safety and connection to the work before they can produce, and owls often want to understand the full structure before they write into it. If that's you, the preparation component I'm about to describe is going to be especially important because preparation is what makes those short windows feel safe and productive instead of scattered. That leads us to the second part, preparation. Preparation is the work that you do outside the writing window so that when that window opens, you can sit down and go directly to the page and start writing. This does look different for different writers, though. For some of you, preparation means spending 5 minutes the night before reviewing what you wrote last and making a one-line note about what comes next. Just one line, something like, tomorrow I'm writing the scene where she finds the letter. That's your entry point. You're not deciding what you're working on when you sit down to write. You've already decided, so you know where you're heading. For others, preparation is more physical. It's having your document open before you start perhaps your commute, or keeping a voice memo running on your phone when you narrate the next scene while you're driving or walking. And this is really good for auditory and auditory digital writers. Now, those voice memos become scene notes that you work from when you're at your desk writing. Writers with kinesthetic tendencies often also find this incredibly effective because they're narrating the physical experience of the scene and noting what they'd feel or sense in that space. And that actually helps to keep kinesthetic writers connected to the work, even when not actively writing. For peacock personalities, preparation might mean sharing your intention to write out loud. So telling a writing friend or an accountability partner what you're going to write next, because the social commitment creates energy. And for eagles who tend to be goal-driven and focused, often they do well with a very clear output target. So it could be, I'm writing this scene full stop, no ambiguity, no option to drift. I'm getting this scene written. The point is that preparation transforms a writing window from just an empty box that you have to fill from scratch into a door you're simply walking through to enter into the page and the words. The cognitive load drops, the resistance drops, and the words come faster and so much easier. Now, the third component is protection. And this is the one most working writers skip, which is why their windows keep disappearing. A writing window that's not protected is just an intention. And intentions, as you well know, are vulnerable to everything. A colleague who needs 5 minutes to talk with you, a phone that, calls and you have to take it, a mental to-do list that gets louder the moment that you try to be still, So, protection means treating your writing window with the same seriousness that you would treat a work meeting or a medical appointment. Practically, that might mean closing your office door and putting on headphones, even if you're not listening to anything, just as a signal to yourself and others that you're unavailable. It might mean putting your phone face down or in another room completely. It could be setting very clear boundaries with your family that, hey guys, I'm not available between 6 and 6:30 in the morning. That time is my writing time. Now, it doesn't have to be a dramatic announcement though. It could just be a quiet, consistent act. But sometimes I find that actually voicing it and letting your family know, hey guys, this is really important. I need to do this. Please, no interruptions during my writing time, can really help everyone get on board and help you feel as though you have that permission to write. Another thing that I see working writers do that can erode their writing time without them even realizing that is decision stacking. They use the writing window to also decide what to write, to review their notes, perhaps reorganize their outline, review some of their work from the next day. Could be to respond to writing group messages or to check their word count from last time. And by the time they actually start writing, the window is almost over. And that's why preparation, doing those decisions beforehand, is what makes the protection component actually work. Your writing minimum viable habit is this: identify your window, prepare your entry point, and protect the time. That's it. Not a complex system, a repeatable practice. Because remember, consistency is the key to entering your window and actually getting the most out of that window of writing that you possibly can. Now, I want to offer you one more idea before we move into the close for the episode, and it's a mindset shift as much as a writing practice. Most writers who feel like they don't have time to write are actually measuring time the wrong way. They're thinking in terms of sessions. So it might be they're thinking, I need a proper writing session to sit down and write and make real progress. And so that 20-minute window doesn't feel like it counts because it's too short. But remember, writing doesn't accumulate in sessions. It accumulates in words, and words add up across 20-minute windows just as much as they do across 3-hour ones. Consider this. If you write just 200 words in a 20-minute window and you do that 5 days a week, you have 1,000 words at the end of the week. In a year, that's 52,000 words. And for some writers, that's their novel. And for others, it's a novel very nearly done. So though it might not sound like a lot to you, where are you now with your writing? Would you like to be 52,000 words ahead in a year's time? Or could you be in a year's time where you are again after previous years of not writing? You know, little bits will actually create a lot of words over time. And let's face it, how quickly does time go? I don't know about you, but I can't believe it's already April. Like, where has the beginning of this year gone? Could you imagine if you had found those 20-minute windows in already 3 months, you could have about 15,000 words done. And that is going to be a lot closer to the finish line for a lot of you than you ever have gotten. So I really want you to consider that. The slow and steady win the race, as opposed to those trying to rush ahead or to find these blocks of time that are just practically impossible given work and family and life happening. Small, consistent writing blocks is what will get your book written, especially if you are writing while working full time and you find it really difficult to sit down and find those few hours of blocks that ideally you would like. Remember, the writing life, the writing sessions, the writing windows that you need are ones that you can fit inside of your actual life. Now, here's what I know about the writers I work with. They're not lacking talent and they're not lacking ideas. What they're missing is a clear structure, someone in their corner and a way through the patterns that keep slowing them down and keeping them stuck. If that resonates, book a free clarity call with me, and in 15 minutes, we can have a chat to really understand where you're at, what might be blocking you, and how I can help you to actually move your book forward. Head to madisonmichaels.com/call, or you can find the link in the show notes. But book in a free chat with me and let's see if we can help get you from the writer you want to be to the writer you are destined to be. Before I go, your one action item from today is simple. Find a 20-minute window this week, not your ideal one, your actual one. Identify it, prepare for it, and protect it. Then I want you to write into it, and you might be surprised with what happens. Now, this is part 1 of the Writing While Working Full-Time series. So if today landed for you, stay close because there is more to come. And remember, my friends, you are the vessel for your story. You just need to let the words flow through you and onto the page. Until next time, take care and let's write the darn book together. My friend, I hope today's episode gave you exactly what you needed for your writing journey. And if it did, would you take 30 seconds to share it with another writer who's struggling to start or finish their book? And if you're loving the show, I'd be so grateful if you left a quick review. It means the world to me and truly makes my day to know that this podcast is helping you. And as you head back into your week, I hope you feel more supported and connected to your creativity. And remember, you're a vessel for the story. So let the words flow through you and onto the page. All right, I'm off to refill my cup of liquid gold and go and do a little writing of my own. Take care, and I'll meet you back here in the next episode of Write the Darn Book.